The afternoon sun beat down on the busy downtown street as Keisha dragged her tired feet along the cracked sidewalk. Her blue hospital scrub stuck to her back with sweat, and her white sneakers had seen better days. 16 hours. That's how long she had been on her feet at City General Hospital, moving from one patient to the next, checking vitals, giving medications, and holding hands with scared families. Her shoulders ached from lifting patients, and her lower back screamed with every step. The double shift had been brutal, but the extra money would help cover her mother's new heart medication. The prescription cost more than Keisha made in 3 days, but what choice did she have? Her mother needed it to stay alive. As she walked toward the bus stop, Keisha's mind wandered to the bills waiting at home. The electricity notice sat on her kitchen table, bright red letters demanding payment within 5 days. Her son's college application fees were due next week, and her car had been making that grinding noise again. She pushed these worries aside and focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The downtown area buzzed with its usual afternoon chaos. Business people in expensive suits rushed past, talking loudly on their phones. Street vendors called out to potential customers and car horns honked in the distance. Keisha had walked these same streets for 5 years, taking the bus to and from work because her old Honda couldn't be trusted for the daily trip. She stopped at the corner of 5th and Main, waiting for the light to change. The crosswalk was packed with people eager to get home from work. Keisha checked her phone and saw she had missed 3 calls from her teenage son. She would call him back once she got on the bus. Probably needed help with his homework again. Or maybe he was asking about dinner. She hoped he had remembered to check on his grandmother. That's when she noticed the little girl. The child couldn't have been more than 5 years old, standing alone near the newspaper stand. Her blonde curls bounced as she looked around with wide, confused eyes. She wore a pink dress that probably cost more than Keisha's monthly grocery budget, and her tiny white shoes were spotless. In her small hands, she clutched a gray stuffed elephant that looked well-loved despite its obvious quality. Keisha glanced around, expecting to see worried parents searching for their lost child. But everyone seemed focused on their own business. The business people walked past without noticing. The vendors were busy with customers. Even the other people waiting at the crosswalk seemed oblivious to the fact that a tiny girl stood alone in one of the busiest parts of the city. The child turned in a slow circle, and Keisha could see tears starting to form in her blue eyes. The little girl's bottom lip began to quiver, and she hugged her elephant tighter. Keisha's maternal instincts kicked in immediately. As a mother and a nurse, she couldn't ignore a child in distress. She took a step toward the girl, planning to ask if she was lost and help her find her parents. But before Keisha could reach her, disaster struck. The stuffed elephant slipped from the little girl's hands and tumbled into the street. Without thinking, without looking, without any awareness of the danger around her, the child darted after her beloved toy. Her small legs carried her directly into the path of oncoming traffic. Keisha's heart stopped. Time seemed to slow down as she watched the scene unfold. A large delivery truck was barreling down the street, its driver looking down at his phone instead of the road ahead. The truck was moving fast, too fast to stop even if the driver looked up right now. The little girl bent down in the middle of the street, reaching for her elephant. She had no idea that tons of metal and machinery were racing toward her. The truck's engine roared louder as it approached the intersection. Every muscle in Keisha's exhausted body suddenly came alive. Her fatigue disappeared, replaced by pure adrenaline and determination. She didn't think about her aching back or tired legs. She didn't consider her own safety or the risk she was taking. All she saw was a child in mortal danger, and all she knew was that she had to act. Keisha launched herself forward with more speed than she thought possible. Her sneakers pounded against the asphalt as she raced into the street. The truck's horn began blaring as the driver finally looked up and saw the chaos ahead, but it was too late for him to stop. She reached the little girl just as the truck bore down on them. Keisha wrapped her arms around the child and threw both of them toward the sidewalk with every ounce of strength she had. They hit the concrete hard, Keisha's body cushioning the little girl's fall as the delivery truck thundered past, missing them by mere inches. The wind from the massive vehicle whipped Keisha's hair across her face as she lay on the sidewalk, gasping for breath. Her left elbow was scraped and bleeding, and her hip would definitely be bruised tomorrow, but she didn't care about any of that. The only thing that mattered was the small, warm body in her arms. The little girl was shaking but unharmed, She looked up at Keisha with those same wide blue eyes now filled with confusion rather than fear. The stuffed elephant lay forgotten in the street, flattened by the truck's massive tires. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Keisha asked softly, checking the child for any injuries. Her nurse training took over as she gently examined the girl's arms and legs. No cuts, no bruises, nothing broken. Just a scared little girl who had no idea how close she had come to tragedy. The child nodded and buried her face against Keisha's shoulder. Around them, people began to gather, their voices mixing into a concerned buzz. Someone was calling 911. Another person asked if they needed an ambulance, but Keisha barely heard any of it. Her attention was focused entirely on the little girl in her arms. "Where are your mommy and daddy?" Keisha asked gently, smoothing the child's curls. "They must be looking for you." The little girl pointed across the street toward a tall glass building. Keisha followed her gaze but couldn't see anyone who looked like they were searching for a lost child. The street had returned to its normal chaos with people walking past as if nothing had happened. What Keisha didn't notice was the black luxury car parked across the street. She didn't see the man sitting inside, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. She had no idea that someone had witnessed the entire rescue, someone whose life had just been changed forever by her split-second decision to risk everything for a stranger's child. As Keisha sat on the sidewalk, holding the little girl and waiting for help to arrive, she couldn't have imagined that this moment would transform not just the child's life, but her own as well. Sometimes the most ordinary days hold the most extraordinary possibilities, hidden in plain sight until someone brave enough steps forward to change everything. The little girl was still trembling in Keisha's arms when she heard fast footsteps approaching. A man's voice cut through the noise of the gathering crowd filled with panic and desperation. "Lily! Oh my God, Lily!" Keisha looked up to see a tall man in an expensive gray suit running toward them. His face was pale with fear, and his perfectly styled hair was now disheveled from running. Even in his panic, everything about him screamed wealth, from his Italian leather shoes to the gold watch glinting on his wrist. The little girl's head snapped up at the sound of her name. "Daddy!" she cried, reaching her small arms toward him. The man dropped to his knees beside them on the concrete sidewalk, not caring that his $1,000 suit was getting dirty. His hands shook as he gently took his daughter from Keisha's arms, holding her close and checking every inch of her for injuries. "Are you hurt? Tell Daddy if anything hurts," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "I'm so sorry, baby. Daddy should have been watching you." Keisha slowly got to her feet, wincing as her scraped elbow protested. She brushed the dirt from her scrubs and watched the reunion, feeling a mix of relief and awkwardness. The contrast between this man's obvious wealth and her own worn appearance made her suddenly aware of how she must look. Tired, disheveled, and definitely not someone who belonged in his world. The man looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "You saved my daughter's life," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "I saw everything from my car. That truck would have—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm just glad she's safe," Keisha replied softly. "Any parent would have done the same thing." "But you're not her parent," the man said, standing up while still holding Lily close. "You didn't have to risk your life for a stranger's child, but you did. You didn't even hesitate." Keisha shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. Around them, the crowd was starting to disperse now that they could see everyone was okay. The excitement was over and people had their own lives to get back to. "I'm a nurse," she explained simply. "And I'm a mother. When you see a child in danger, you don't think about it. You just act." The man extended his free hand. "I'm Robert Harrison, and this is my daughter Lily." Keisha shook his hand, noticing how soft it was compared to her own work-worn fingers. "Keisha Williams. Mrs. Williams, I can't begin to express how grateful I am. You literally saved my little girl's life. Please let me do something to thank you, anything." Keisha shook her head. "That's not necessary, Mr. Harrison. I'm just happy Lily is okay." But Robert wasn't giving up easily. "At least let me pay for your medical bills. You're bleeding." He gestured to her scraped elbow. Keisha glanced down at the minor injury and almost laughed. After 16 hours on her feet dealing with real medical emergencies, a scraped elbow was nothing. "It's just a scratch. I'll clean it up when I get home." "Then let me drive you home," Robert insisted. "It's the least I can do." "I take the bus," Keisha said, pointing toward the bus stop. "My ride should be here any minute." Robert looked shocked, as if the idea of taking public transportation had never occurred to him. Please, I have my car right here. After what you've done for us, riding the bus seems what? Keisha asked, a slight edge creeping into her voice. She had dealt with wealthy patients before who looked down on her circumstances. Robert caught himself, realizing how his words might sound. I just meant that you should be treated like the hero you are. Little Lily, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, the nice lady's elephant got squished. All three of them looked out at the street where the stuffed elephant lay flattened in the road. Robert's face fell as he realized what had happened to his daughter's favorite toy. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry about Mr. Peanuts, he said, kissing the top of Lily's head. It's okay, Daddy, Lily said, though her lower lip was starting to quiver again. The nice lady is more important than Mr. Peanuts. Keisha's heart melted at the little girl's words. She knelt down to Lily's level.
You know what?
I bet there are lots of elephants at the toy store who would love to come home with you. Lily's eyes brightened a little. Do you think so? I'm sure of it, Keisha said with a smile. Robert watched this exchange with growing amazement. Not only had this woman saved his daughter's life, but she was also showing her kindness and compassion afterward. Most people would have rushed off by now, eager to collect whatever reward they could get. Ms. Williams, he said, pulling out his wallet. Please, at least let me give you something for your trouble. Keisha stood up quickly, her expression hardening. I don't want your money, Mr. Harrison. But I need to do something, Robert said desperately. You don't understand what you've done. Lily is everything to me. She's all I have left since my wife died 3 years ago. If something had happened to her, his voice trailed off as he struggled to maintain his composure. Keisha's expression softened immediately. She understood the pain of loss, the fear of losing someone you loved. I'm sorry about your wife, she said quietly. Thank you, Robert replied. That's why I need you to understand how much this means to me. You gave me back my whole world today. The sound of air brakes interrupted their conversation as Keisha's bus pulled up to the stop. She glanced at it, then back at Robert and Lily. That's my bus, she said. I really need to get home. My son will be worried and I need to check on my mother. Wait, Robert said quickly, pulling out a business card. Please take this. If you ever need anything at all, call me. Keisha hesitated for a moment, then took the card. It was heavy and expensive feeling, with raised gold letters that read, Harrison Development Corporation. Robert Harrison, CEO. I won't call, she said honestly. But I'll keep it. Robert wanted to argue, to insist that she take his contact information too, but something in her manner told him not to push. This woman had her pride, and he respected that. Can I at least know where you work? He asked, in case I want to send flowers or something. City General Hospital, Keisha replied. But really, that's not necessary. The bus driver honked his horn impatiently. Keisha waved at him to indicate she was coming. I have to go, she said, turning toward the bus. Ms. Williams, Robert called after her. She turned back. Thank you, he said simply, for everything. Keisha nodded and hurried toward the bus. As she climbed the steps and showed her pass to the driver, she could feel Robert and Lily watching her through the window. As the bus pulled away from the curb, Robert stood on the sidewalk holding his daughter, watching until the vehicle disappeared into traffic. He looked down at the spot where Keisha had saved Lily's life, then at the flattened elephant in the street. Daddy, will we see the nice lady again? Lily asked. Robert held his daughter tighter. I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. But even as he said it, Robert was already forming a plan. He had Keisha's name and knew where she worked. A woman like that didn't just disappear from his life after what she had done. He would find a way to properly thank her, whether she wanted him to or not. Robert couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that delivery truck racing toward his daughter. He saw Keisha throwing herself into danger without a second thought. The image played over and over in his mind like a movie he couldn't turn off. He sat in his study at 2 a.m, staring at the business card he had given Keisha. Harrison Development Corporation. He owned half the commercial buildings in the city, had more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes, and employed hundreds of people. But none of that had mattered when his daughter was in danger. A tired nurse in worn scrubs had been the one to save the most precious thing in his world. Lily had asked about the nice lady at bedtime, wanting to know if they would see her again. Robert had promised they would, but now he wondered if that was a promise he could keep. Keisha had made it clear she didn't want anything from him. She hadn't even wanted to give him her phone number. By morning, Robert had made his decision. He picked up his phone and called David Chin, a private investigator he had used for business matters in the past. "I need you to find someone," Robert said when David answered. "Her name is Keisha Williams and she works at City General Hospital. I need to know everything about her situation." "This for business or personal?" David asked. "Personal. Very personal." 3 days later, David's report arrived on Robert's desk. As he read through the pages, Robert felt his heart sink with each detail. Keisha Williams, 32 years old, single mother working double shifts to support her family. Her 17-year-old son had straight A's but was looking at community college because they couldn't afford anything else. Her mother had recently been diagnosed with heart problems and needed expensive medication that insurance only partially covered. The report showed Keisha's financial struggles in black and white. Behind on several bills, driving a 15-year-old car that needed major repairs, living in a small apartment in one of the city's rougher neighborhoods. She had been working at City General for 5 years, always picking up extra shifts, never calling in sick, respected by her colleagues for her dedication and skill. But there was something else in the report that made Robert's breath catch. 3 years ago, during the months when his wife was dying, Keisha had been one of the nurses in the oncology ward. She had cared for his wife during some of those final difficult days. Robert remembered those weeks as a blur of grief and desperation. He had barely noticed the nurses who came and went, too focused on his wife's declining condition to pay attention to anything else. But now he wondered if Keisha remembered him, remembered sitting by his wife's bedside day after day, holding her hand and whispering words of love and encouragement. The irony wasn't lost on him. The woman who had saved his daughter's life had also helped care for his wife during her final battle. It felt like more than coincidence. It felt like fate. Meanwhile, Keisha was dealing with her own challenges. Her car had finally given up completely on Tuesday morning, leaving her stranded in the hospital parking lot after her night shift. The mechanic's estimate for repairs was more than the car was worth, but she couldn't afford anything better. She had started taking 2 buses to get to work, adding an extra hour each way to her commute. The lost time meant less sleep, less time with her family, and more exhaustion piling on top of exhaustion. Her son had been accepted to State University, his dream school, but the financial aid package wasn't enough. Even with his partial scholarship, they would need thousands more just for the first year. Keisha had applied for every loan and grant she could find, but the numbers still didn't add up. "Mom, maybe I should just go to community college for 2 years," her son said over dinner on Thursday night. "Save some money, then transfer." Keisha looked at her boy, so smart and determined, willing to sacrifice his dreams to help the family. It broke her heart. "We'll figure something out," she said, though she had no idea how. Her mother's condition was getting worse too. The medication helped, but the doctor wanted to add another prescription that would cost even more. Keisha had started picking up every available overtime shift, but there were only so many hours in a day. On Friday afternoon, Robert made an unscheduled visit to City General Hospital. He told himself he just wanted to see where Keisha worked, maybe catch a glimpse of her to make sure she was okay. He had no plan beyond that. The hospital was busy as always. Robert wandered the halls, feeling out of place in his expensive suit among the medical staff in their scrubs and lab coats. He found the nurses' station where Keisha worked, but she wasn't there. A colleague told him she was on break. Robert found her in the small break room, sitting alone at a plastic table with a cup of coffee and a sandwich that looked like it came from a vending machine. She was reading something on her phone, her brow furrowed with concentration. She looked tired. More than tired, exhausted. Her scrubs were wrinkled and there were dark circles under her eyes. Robert could see the weight of her struggles in the way she sat, the way her shoulders slumped forward. For a moment he considered approaching her. But something held him back. Maybe it was the memory of how she had refused his help before. Or maybe it was the realization that showing up at her workplace might make her uncomfortable. Instead, he watched from the doorway as she finished her sandwich and headed back to work. She moved with purpose despite her fatigue, stopping to help a confused family find their loved one's room, smiling at a child in a wheelchair, checking on an elderly patient who seemed to be struggling. This was who she was, Robert realized. Someone who helped others even when she was struggling herself. Someone who gave everything she had to her work, her family, her community, the kind of person who didn't think twice about risking her life for a stranger's child. As he left the hospital, Robert's mind was racing with possibilities. He couldn't just hand Keisha money. She had made it clear that wouldn't work. But maybe there was another way. Maybe he could create an opportunity that would let her help herself while accepting his gratitude. That evening, Robert sat in his home office, Lily playing quietly on the floor nearby with her new stuffed elephant. He had already replaced Mr. Peanuts, but Lily still asked about the nice lady every day. Robert pulled out his phone and called his head of human resources. "I want you to create a new position," he said. "Community health liaison for our residential developments. Someone who can help us make sure our properties are promoting wellness and safety for families." "That's an interesting idea, Mr. Harrison. What kind of qualifications would we need for something like that?" "Someone with medical experience. Nursing background would be perfect. Someone who understands what families really need to stay healthy and safe." As Robert outlined the position, he smiled for the first time in days. This wasn't charity. This was a legitimate job opportunity that would benefit his company, while giving Keisha a chance to use her skills in a new way. A chance to make more money, have better hours, and maybe even pursue further education. He didn't know if she would accept it. She was proud and she might see through his intentions. But he had to try. Keisha Williams had saved his daughter's life and possibly his own sanity. The least he could do was give her the chance to save herself. Keisha was having the worst week of her life. On Monday, her mother had collapsed in the kitchen and spent the night in the emergency room. The doctors said her heart medication needed to be adjusted, which meant more expensive prescriptions. On Tuesday, her son came home with news that the deadline for his college deposit had been moved up by 2 weeks. On Wednesday, the landlord called about the overdue rent. By Friday evening, as Keisha walked out of City General after another double shift, she felt like she was drowning. She stood at the bus stop, calculating numbers in her head for the 100th time that week. No matter how she arranged the math, there wasn't enough money to cover everything. That's when she saw the familiar black Mercedes pull up to the curb. Robert Harrison stepped out of the driver's seat, looking as polished as ever in his dark suit. But this time Keisha noticed something different about him. He seemed nervous, almost uncertain, which was strange for a man who obviously commanded respect wherever he went. "Ms. Williams," he said, approaching her carefully. "I hope you don't mind me coming by. I wanted to talk to you." Keisha felt her defenses go up immediately. "Mr. Harrison, I told you before that I don't need anything from you." "I know what you said," Robert replied. "But I have something to ask you, not something to give you." That caught Keisha's attention. She had expected another offer of money or some kind of reward for saving Lily. "What do you mean?" Robert glanced around at the busy hospital entrance, then back at her. "Could we talk somewhere more private? Maybe I could buy you coffee? There's a place across the street." Keisha was exhausted and wanted nothing more than to go home, but something in his tone made her curious. "I guess I have a few minutes." The coffee shop was nearly empty at this hour. Robert ordered them both coffee and found a quiet table in the corner. Keisha sat across from him, still wondering what this was about. "I've been thinking about what you did for Lily," Robert began. "Not just the rescue, but the way you talked to her afterward, the kindness you showed her." "She's a sweet little girl," Keisha said. "Is she doing okay?" "She's fine, thanks to you. But she asks about you every day. She wants to know when she'll see the nice lady again." Keisha smiled despite herself. "Kids bounce back fast from scary things." "Adults don't always bounce back as easily," Robert said quietly. "I lost my wife 3 years ago, cancer. She spent her final weeks in your hospital." Keisha's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss." "The thing is," Robert continued, "I think you might have been one of her nurses. The oncology ward, room 314, a woman named Catherine Harrison." Keisha's eyes widened as the memory came flooding back. A quiet, elegant woman with kind eyes who never complained despite her pain. And her husband, who rarely left her side, who would hold her hand and read to her from old poetry books. "I remember her," Keisha said softly. "She was beautiful, so brave." Robert's eyes filled with tears. "She was. And I remember now that there was a nurse who was especially kind to her, who would sit with her when I had to step out to take care of Lily, who would braid her hair when she felt well enough to get out of bed." "That was part of my job," Keisha said. "No, it wasn't. Braiding hair and reading magazines together and listening to her talk about her fears, that wasn't in any job description. That was you being human to someone who needed it. They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in memories of those difficult days. "Why are you telling me this?" Keisha finally asked. Robert leaned forward. "Because I realize now that you've been taking care of my family for years without me even knowing it. First my wife, then my daughter. And I want to offer you something that might help you take care of your own family." Keisha's guard went back up. "I told you I don't want charity. This isn't charity. It's a job offer." That wasn't what Keisha had expected. A job offer? Robert pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "My company is expanding into community wellness programs. We're building family-focused housing developments, and we need someone to help us make sure we're addressing real health and safety needs. Someone with medical experience who understands what families are actually going through." Keisha stared at him suspiciously. "And you just happened to create this position?" "I created it because I realized we needed it," Robert said honestly. "But yes, I was thinking about you when I designed the role. Mr. Harrison, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't accept a job that only exists because you feel guilty about what happened." "Look at the job description," Robert said, sliding the folder across the table. "Look at the qualifications we need, the work that's involved. This isn't some made-up position. This is real work that would genuinely help my company and the communities we serve." Keisha opened the folder reluctantly. As she read through the pages, her skepticism began to fade. The position was detailed and specific. Community health liaison, responsible for assessing wellness needs in residential developments, coordinating with local healthcare providers, developing safety programs for families. The salary was nearly double what she made at the hospital, with benefits that would cover her mother's medications and her son's college expenses. "This seems too good to be true," she said. "Maybe it is," Robert admitted, "but maybe sometimes good things happen to good people." Keisha closed the folder and looked at him directly. "Why is this so important to you?" "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would do." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "When my wife was dying, I felt completely helpless. All my money, all my success, none of it could save her. But there were people like you who made her final days bearable, who treated her with dignity and kindness when she felt like she was losing everything." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When I saw that truck heading for Lily, I felt that same helplessness. But you weren't helpless. You acted. You saved her. And I realized that maybe this is how the world works. Maybe we're all supposed to help each other when we can. So this is your way of helping? This is my way of saying thank you to someone who helped my family when we needed it most. Twice." Keisha studied his face, looking for any sign that this was some elaborate scheme or pity offering. But all she saw was sincerity. "I would need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course, take all the time you need. And I would want to make sure this is legitimate, that I'm not taking a job that's just charity disguised as work. I'd expect nothing less. Talk to your family, research my company, ask any questions you want." Keisha picked up the folder again. "The hours are better than what I have now. Much better. Regular business hours, weekends off, vacation time. And the health insurance. Covers everything, including pre-existing conditions and family members." Keisha felt tears starting to form in her eyes. For the first time in months, maybe years, she could see a way forward. A way to help her son go to college, to get her mother the care she needed, to stop working herself to exhaustion. "If I took this job," she said carefully, "it would be because I earned it, not because you feel obligated to help me." "Ms. Williams," Robert said seriously, "I've seen your work. I've seen how you care for people. Any company would be lucky to have you." As they left the coffee shop, Keisha felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Maybe Robert Harrison was right. Maybe sometimes good things really did happen to good people. Keisha spent the entire weekend researching Harrison Development Corporation. She read every article she could find online, looked up their projects, and even called a friend who worked in real estate to ask about the company's reputation. Everything checked out. Robert Harrison was known for treating his employees well and for building quality housing that families could actually afford. On Sunday evening, she sat at her kitchen table with her son and mother, the job offer folder spread out between them. "Mom, this is amazing," her son said, looking through the papers for the third time. "With this salary, I could go to State University. And you wouldn't have to work those crazy double shifts anymore. Her mother nodded slowly. It sounds too good to be true, but sometimes good things do happen. The question is, how do you feel about it, Keisha? That was the problem. Keisha still wasn't sure how she felt. Part of her was excited about the opportunity, but another part worried that accepting would somehow change who she was. She had always been independent, always made her own way in the world. I think I need to take it, she said finally. Not because I owe him anything, but because it's a real job that I can do well. And because my family needs this chance. On Monday morning, Keisha called Robert and accepted the position. Her voice was steady and professional as she discussed start dates and logistics, but inside her heart was racing with excitement and nervousness. 2 months later, Keisha barely recognized her own life. She worked in a clean, modern office with a window that overlooked the city park. Her job involved visiting housing developments, talking to families about their needs, and working with architects and planners to create safer, healthier communities. She loved the work. For the first time in years, she felt like she was using all of her skills. Her medical knowledge, her understanding of what families really needed, her ability to listen and solve problems. She was making a real difference in people's lives, just in a different way than she had at the hospital. Her son had started his freshman year at State University, calling home every week to share stories about his classes and new friends. He was studying engineering, dreaming of designing buildings that could withstand natural disasters and keep families safe. Her mother's health had stabilized with the new medications that their improved insurance now covered completely. She had started volunteering at the community center, teaching other seniors how to use computers. But the biggest change was in Keisha herself. She walked taller now, smiled more often, and slept through the night without worrying about bills. She had even started taking evening classes toward her nurse practitioner degree, something she had dreamed about for years but never thought possible. 3 months into her new job, Keisha was reviewing plans for a new family housing complex when her assistant knocked on her office door. "There's someone here to see you," she said with a smile. "A very determined little girl who says she knows you." Keisha looked up to see Lily peeking around the doorframe, still clutching a stuffed elephant, though this one was brown instead of gray. Behind her stood Robert, looking slightly embarrassed. "I hope you don't mind," Robert said. "Lily has been asking to visit you at work for weeks. She wanted to see where the nice lady goes every day." Keisha's face lit up. "Of course I don't mind. Come in, sweetheart." Lily ran over to Keisha's desk, her eyes wide as she looked around the office. "You have a really big desk. And look at all these pictures of houses." "Those are houses that my company is building for families," Keisha explained. "We try to make them safe and comfortable for kids like you." "Can I see?" Lily asked, climbing onto the chair next to Keisha's desk. For the next 20 minutes, Keisha showed Lily the plans and models, explaining how they designed playgrounds and made sure the streets were safe for children to ride bikes. Lily listened with the serious attention that only a 6-year-old could give to something that interested her. Robert watched from across the room, amazed at how natural Keisha was with his daughter. It reminded him of how she had comforted Lily on that terrifying day 9 months ago. "Ms. Keisha," Lily said suddenly, "Daddy says you saved my life." "Your daddy saved your life too," Keisha replied, "by loving you so much and taking good care of you every day. But you caught me when the big truck was coming." "Yes, I did. And I would do it again in a heartbeat." Lily hugged Keisha tightly. "I'm glad you're not tired anymore." Keisha looked at Robert over Lily's head, surprised. "What does she mean?" "She remembered that you looked very tired the day we met," Robert explained. "She's been worried about you." "Well, you can stop worrying," Keisha told Lily. "I'm not tired anymore. I sleep better, and I have time to take care of myself now." After Lily and Robert left, Keisha sat in her office thinking about how much had changed. A year ago, she had been struggling just to get through each day. Now she was planning for the future, building something meaningful, and helping families create better lives for themselves. That evening, Keisha attended the grand opening of the first housing development she had helped design. Families with children walked through the new homes, excited about fresh starts and new possibilities. The playground was full of kids laughing and playing, and parents stood around talking about their hopes for their community. Robert found her standing near the playground, watching the children swing and climb and run. "You should be proud," he said. "This place is exactly what families need." Safe streets, good lighting, green spaces for kids to play. We all did this together, Keisha replied. But yes, I am proud. I have some news, Robert said. The city council approved our proposal for 5 more developments like this one. They want you to lead the health and safety planning for all of them. Keisha turned to look at him. Are you serious? Completely serious. You've proven that this approach works. Families are happier, kids are safer, and the communities are stronger. As they stood there watching children play in the fading evening light, Keisha thought about the chain of events that had brought her to this moment. One split second of courage, one decision to help a stranger's child had changed everything. Robert, she said, using his first name for the first time. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had never met that day? Robert was quiet for a moment. I try not to think about it, he said finally, because the alternative is too terrible to imagine. I don't mean the accident, Keisha said. I mean all of this. The job, the new life, the opportunity to help families. Do you think it would have happened anyway? Robert smiled. I think people like you find a way to help others no matter what circumstances they're in. Maybe the details would have been different, but you would have made a difference somehow. A year and a half after that terrifying afternoon on 5th and Main, Keisha stood in her new office overlooking the city, surrounded by plans for communities that would house hundreds of families. Her son was thriving in college, her mother was healthy and happy, and she was building a career that combined everything she loved about helping people. Sometimes she still thought about that moment when she saw Lily running into traffic. She had acted without thinking, driven by instinct and love for a child she didn't even know. She had never imagined that one moment of courage could create ripples that would spread so far and touch so many lives. But maybe that's how the world really works. Maybe every act of kindness, every moment of bravery, every decision to help someone else creates possibilities we can't even imagine. Maybe the most ordinary people can change everything, one courageous choice at a time.